Hello, everyone, and welcome to No Off Season, presented by Amazon Business. I'm Zena Cada.
I'm Sabreena Merchant.
And I'm Ben Pickman.
And today on the show, some top teams have exited the playoff stage and heads are already starting to roll, but probably not the ones some of you expected. Or maybe you did. Sandy Brondello is out at the Liberty. Noelle Quinn is out at the Storm. We're going to dive into why these head coaches have been fired, who might be next in line for their jobs, and some deeper questions around representation at the top of the teams in the W. But first, an applause is called for. Let's give it up for Ben Pickman coming back from overseas, having ran a marathon, more miles. I mean, I'm sure I probably racked them up over college, but more miles than I could ever run. Absolutely. 26.2 is all done, Ben. How do you feel?
I feel pretty good, Zena. Yeah, I ran the Berlin Marathon, and let me just get ahead of it. No, I did not see Harry Styles. That is the number one question I have been asked this week. More than how did you do or how are you feeling? It is, did you see Harry? Crossed the finish line, ran a time not too far behind his. He ran a great time, but no, there were no sightings. I'll be very clear about that right now, Zena.
Damn. You skipped ahead for me. I thought it was so cool, though, that he ran under an anonymous name, so people didn't know until afterwards. I guess he got spotted. But congratulations, Ben.
Thank you.
How you did this.
I ran under my name, too, if we want to be very clear here as well.
Okay.
No pseudonym for me either.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah, I learned about Harry's time before I learned about Ben's time. That's for sure.
Right, exactly. I think the whole world found out about Harry Styles running this. And I think the only way that people knew or to think about the Berlin Marathon was either you follow Ben Pickman on social media or you heard about this Harry Styles situation. But you finding a way to fit that in during the WNBA playoffs is crazy because it's been wild since you left, and we're happy you're back because it's not only just been playoffs, it's been stuff off the court as well. But we're going to get into the games first, okay? Tuesday night, both semifinals matchups squared off. I was sat on my couch for 4 hours straight. It was wonderful. It was too hot in the Bay, but it was great because it was some really good leveling out of both of these matchups. The Mercury and the Aces notched wins, and now each series is at 1-1. So let's start with the more decisive win, okay? Back in Vegas, the Aces bounced back, roundly defeating the Fever 90-68. And I don't know. I don't think it was close. It didn't feel close, except for like maybe the first quarter. But it was a tough one for Indiana, and I don't think you could have not expected this, the way that Aces rolled into this game. Sabreena, you were there. We know that the last time they matched up, Asia had just won the MVP. So there was already a buzz in the air because of that. But now there's a buzz in the air because it's like, hold up, we're 0-1 and we let Indiana steal one at home. So what was the vibe in the arena and what are you seeing in these two teams?
Yeah, so we talked about the vibe on Sunday. A noon game in Las Vegas on a Sunday is not prime for people to be present and, active participants as fans at Michelob Ultra Arena. A much better vibe, I would say, at the 6:30 p.m. Also not great on a Tuesday. But hey, people were there. The crowd was loud. They were into it. Asia was much more mentally ready to go, I think. I know she's mentioned that getting the MVP award on the same day as playing a game has always been emotionally challenging for her. Just trying to separate the individual element with also having to perform for her team. It's just a lot to have to process all at once. High class problems, really. But she was definitely ready to go on Tuesday. Asia does not have bad games twice in a row. So, Aces PR had sent out a stat that the last 5 games that Asia has shot below 30% just throughout her career. She comes back the next game shooting about 60%, averaging 30 points and 12 rebounds. So a little short of those numbers, but not needed for the Las Vegas Aces as they soundly took care of the Fever. Like you said, not a lot of surprises here. This is what Vegas had to do. Teams that are down 0-2 in a best-of-5 playoff series are winless in 19 tries in WNBA playoff history. So you can't afford that, especially not when you're losing home court advantage. If you're the Fever, you feel good about getting out of Vegas with a split. If you're the Aces, you obviously feel good about having showed what you're capable of doing. So, yeah, I wish I had more to say about this, but this is what the Aces are supposed to do. It's what they did, and everybody goes back to Indiana for a very pivotal game 3.
Ben, did you get a chance to watch this game when you came back?
Yeah, I'm caught up on everything. Don't worry about me, Zena.
Good. I just wanted to make sure because now, as Sabreena alluded to, Asia went off. and Asia was moving in space. You saw their assist total go from 12 in the first game, 22 in this game. They were moving the ball around. They were feeling very comfortable, very Aces-like. So, Ben, I'm looking like if I'm Steph White, and she's been a chess player, and you saw it in Atlanta, and now you're seeing some of it play out here with the Aces, but what's her next chess move going into game 3? They're back at home in Indiana.
It's a good question. I mean, for me, I'm looking at Kelsey Mitchell and how she performs in game 3 and trying to make sure that Kelsey Mitchell is getting as high quality of shot attempts as she possibly can, because she had to work incredibly hard in game 2 when she only has 13 points to try and find looks. And that was because, Jackie Young is fighting over every screen. And if Jackie Young is getting beat off pick and rolls, you see Asia Wilson coming out on the perimeter into space. And Asia Wilson, some of those looks Mitchell made, but Asia is as good of a perimeter defender as any player who is her size in the WNBA. So if I'm Steph White, again, it's trying to make sure that you can get a consistent performance out of Kelsey Mitchell, who took more field goal attempts than she scored points in game 2. And there was this stretch in the regular season. Kelsey has been really consistent for the Fever. That is one of her strengths. That's why she was a top 5 MVP. But there was this stretch in kind of late July and early August that I'm kind of highlighting if I'm the Fever, and I'm trying to avoid going forward, because she has this stretch where she scores 8 points, then the next game she scores 23, then 9, then 34, then 12. Right?
Ooh,
Game 1, she
okay.
scores 34 points. Game 2, she scores 13. You really need her to bounce back, and you need her to sustain that bounce back. That's the only chance that the Fever have. They need to make sure Mitchell is consistent, and they need to make sure their defense is as physical and aggressive as it can be. We have seen both coaches talk a lot about officiating and physicality in this series. You can expect the Fever, who, around the league are known for playing physical defense, to try and utilize their home crowd to be physical, to create chaos, to feed off the energy of the crowd on defense, and they need to let Mitchell cook and get good opportunities on the offensive end.
It's a really good point. Sabreena just said Asia doesn't have 2 bad games in a row, but it seems like Kelsey Mitchell also doesn't have 2 bad games in a row. She went 4 of 6 from the three-point line in that first game, 1 of 6 in that second game. So I'm expecting a bounce back out of her, but my question is that bounce back really going to do anything after the fact that the Aces have adjusted in the way that they're guarding her and showing her different looks, and particularly clogging up her vision, whether it's Jackie Young in front of her with the tenacity, or just that second line of defense being able to kind of dissuade her from going into the paint or going into that mid-range that she likes. I don't know if it's enough. What do y'all think?
Yeah, I mean, I think offense is really where Indiana lost that game. Just a lot of live ball turnovers, a lot of unforced errors, letting Vegas get back into the open court, not cleaning the glass particularly well. You'd think you'd just shoot better at Gamebridge, right? Like Lexi Hull had a lot of good looks. I mean, she hit 4 threes already, and I still think that she had left a lot on the table, honestly.
Yeah, agreed.
So, you get her going a little bit. You get perhaps Shea Petty going off the bench. Maybe Ariel Powers finds a couple moments here and there, but that's what you expect when you get back home, right? Like the rotation players, the role players play a little bit better, and like you get a little bit of a boost to augment your stars, right? So if we expect that Kelsey Mitchell is going to have a bounce back game, then it's just a matter of like, do they have enough to spot around her? Because that's been the question with the Fever coming into the postseason, right? Like they've experienced so many injuries, their depth is so beaten down that like who is going to be able to step up to the plate any given night? And at home, I think you just have better odds that someone's going to be able to do it.
Let's flip over to the other game, because I'm not gonna lie, this first game, I was ready to turn it off. Okay, I was ready to turn it off, and I was just like, "Oh, all right, let me just go get some dinner. I'm gonna get ready for Aces, and the Fever." And man, Phoenix. As as we were watching this game, I'm going down my socials. I'm seeing what other people are saying. I'm like, there was a way that y'all were beating Minnesota in the first game. It was driving. It was getting into the paint. And it felt as if they were living and dying by the 3 in the first half of that game against Minnesota. And then in the second half, not only were they finding their way into the paint off of good defense in transition, their bench became a thing. DeWanna Bonner had 8 points in the fourth quarter. Catherine Westbeld had 8 points in the third quarter. And they surmounted this unbelievable comeback. I mean, I was so impressed by what Phoenix was able to do, ending up winning that game in overtime against the Minnesota Lynx. Ben, you're caught up. What did you see in that game that you did not expect out of the Phoenix?
Well, I love
Mercury?
that you're talking about wanting to turn off the Aces fever game because, look, had you turned off game 2 of the Mercury and the Lynx midway through the third quarter when the Lynx were up 20 points, no one would have really blamed you because the Lynx usually don't blow opportunities like that. And the Phoenix
I
Mercury,
just want
we
to point
know.
out that the Lynx did blow a 21-point lead not very long ago to Seattle Storm at the end of August. So
Oh,
it's not
that-
unprecedented.
That is why I said not usually. And I was also going to say the Phoenix Mercury, they had only won one game in their franchise's history when trailing by 15 or more points at halftime. And game 2
Wow.
became instance number 2 of that occurrence. So they're not one often to come back from down 15 at the break. But everything kind of started to shift in the third quarter. And, Nafisa Collier said that we beat ourselves. She said unforced turnovers were really important. And there was this stretch where Minnesota had 5 turnovers in 6 possessions late in the third quarter. And that was really key in Phoenix going on their run. And some of it was just a function of simple ball pressure, like extending a little bit of ball pressure after makes, making it a little bit more difficult for Minnesota to initiate offense, and then forcing turnovers, getting out in transition and running. And we just saw the Phoenix Mercury just chip away, like possession after possession after possession. And it wasn't until the 4:09 mark in overtime when they took their first lead since late in the first quarter. So it wasn't even like, they took this lead in the fourth quarter. They literally had to wait until overtime until Sami Whitcomb hits this crazy shot and this crazy broken play sequence in the waning seconds of the game. It was just incredibly impressive for Phoenix to continue to fight, to be gritty, to be resilient, to be aggressive. And, those are qualities that we have seen from them at times all year. And it stems from Alyssa Thomas, who is relentless. It's Satu Sabali, who she talked about in the New York series, like not trying to beat herself up after poor performances. She didn't play her best after game 1. We saw her rebound, scores 24 points in game 2. They just continue to stay with it. And look, Cheryl Reeves said they didn't look like themselves, but this is a good version of the Phoenix Mercury. Like when they are clicking, they have the kind of relentless pressure that they played with in the second half. And, certainly as Sabreena said, that 0-2 stat, they have a lot more momentum heading into Friday's game 3 now.
Right. This is a team that was top 4 in defense. And you saw that in that second half, forcing 11 turnovers for 16 points. And that Sami Whitcomb shot is something to behold. The fact that she airballed the first one and then found her way, and she had been running around all night long, but being able to escape, side dribble, and pull up for 3. What an unbelievable shot.
It was
go ahead, Ben.
it's a crazy shot, and we should listen to Nate Tibbetts post game because he said he drew up 2 plays in the huddle that they ran. This was the second one that they ran, but it seems like they didn't run it correctly. And I even asked him post game. He initially said, like, we didn't run it right. And I asked him at the end of his press conference, can you just confirm and elaborate, like, what didn't you run right about this? And he was hesitant to reveal any trade secrets about what the play was supposed to be. But he said basically that Sami saved my ass. That was a direct quote from him. And that's what great players, great shooters do. Like, totally a broken play, totally a crazy shot. But you saw Sami Whitcomb's fearlessness throughout really the final few minutes of that game. Like, she's a really good shooter and she kept shooting. And I think that's a really, like, that's what you want your role players in those moments to do, to be on the road. It's a veteran role player and someone who, is really important for them going forward.
Yeah, it seemed like Nate said that he had drawn up 2 plays because he expected Minnesota to foul, so then they'd have the second one in their back pocket to run. But then the players weren't clear as to which one they were supposed to run, so they kind of ran the second play, but they didn't run it right. And that's how you end up with Sami Whitcomb just having to pull something out of her ass and, like Nate said, saving him. But I just want to highlight Sami Whitcomb for a second because, we talked about this coming into the series about Minnesota's depth relative to Phoenix's depth, and Minnesota gets 3 points off of their bench in that entire game. A complete shutout from Natisha Heidemann. And this is the kind of game where, like, you would really love to have a Dejanay Carrington when Bridget Carlton can't seem to buy a bucket and when Natisha Heidemann can't get her way going in the paint. And they don't have any options, right? Like, when it comes to their perimeter rotation, it is just the starting guards and Natisha Heidemann. And if you don't have it, like, you just have to find it. And the Lynx couldn't find it. And then you look at Phoenix, where Catherine Westphal comes off the bench and hits those 2 big threes. And DeWanna Bonner, like you mentioned, big performance in the second half and just so important defensively, right? Like what she was able to accomplish
Yes.
with their switching and just all of the defensive assignments that Bonner can handle with her length and her activity. And then you have Sami Whitcomb, also a bench player, coming off and just hitting the very biggest shot of the season. So, you looked at these rosters at the start of the season and thought that we had some questions about the Mercury's depth, and they have proven all of those wrong. Like, they have a lot of options they can go to when things aren't quite clicking, like if it's a Natasha Mack game or if it's a Bonner game or if it's a Westphal game, and like whether it's a Monica Cole McConney assignment or Sami Whitcomb can play these minutes. And I think Nate just pushed a lot of the right buttons, and he frankly just has more options at his disposal right now than Cheryl Reeve does.
Which is a crazy thing to say because that's what we've been talking about the Minnesota Lynx having all season long is depth, 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 and also familiarity with one another, right? Like these are the players that had literally been in the finals just a year removed. And so now you're going into this situation, you got to go away into the X factor with the fact that you don't have this depth that you thought you had because it struggled last game. But we know the Lynx to be resilient. And the funny thing is that the Phoenix Mercury did exactly what Minnesota did to them in that first game. They just flipped it on his head. Came back late, able to win it out. Took an overtime, sure. Okay, I'll give them that. Took an overtime to do it, but still being able to come back. Minnesota knows themselves. They know who they are at their core, regardless of what's happening with Dejanay and their depth. So what's Cheryl Reeves' pregame talk to this team as they head into game 3?
I think what is so telling is I think Cheryl Reeve knows what to say, and I think her players know what she is going to say, and that is like we need to get back to playing Minnesota Lynx basketball. And really, the test is will they listen to the message that she gets across? Because Cheryl Reeve said post game, like she told her players at halftime of game 2, they're going to come out aggressive and basically fight like their season is on the line. And that is exactly what the the Phoenix Mercury did coming out of the halftime locker room. And so in game 3, like, I think they're going to preach, we need to get back to, again, playing with poise, not getting rattled. We need to not let their pressure, the intensity of the crowd, phase us in any form or fashion. I think Cheryl Reeve, you'll see her be aggressive in lineup substitutions, right? If a player is not producing or not up to her standard, like she's shown early in the series in game 1. I mean, you guys talked about it last week with Masha Klindikova, like quick hook, make the change, do what she thinks is best in the moment. I think players fully understand that like Cheryl's going to push whatever button she needs to do to make sure that they win game 3. I think the big difference though between this series and the first one we talked about is on any given night, Phoenix really has arguably 3 players who could be the best player on the floor, right? Certainly, I think you can make that argument pretty easily with Alyssa Thomas and Satu Sabali, and if Kalia Copper is capable of that too. Whereas I don't think you can make that case as clearly in the aces. Like Asia is pretty much always going to be the best player on the floor no matter what. And so that is one thing that I'm a little bit worried of in the case of Minnesota, because like all you need if you're Phoenix right now, you need an unbelievable Satu game or an unbelievable Ka game. And then you get another one of the big 3 to have that kind of game on Sunday, and that's your season, right? Like, it can be as over as that. Now, Minnesota, as Sabreena has said, has rebounded all year. They haven't played like they have played in the second half all year, so they're going to rely on that, knowing that they've been the more consistent team. But, like, the Phoenix Mercury are very much in this series as it goes back to Phoenix.
It does feel like Phoenix has some X and Y and Z factors.
Well done. Well done, Zena. Well done.
I don't know
Wink,
what that means.
wink. Wink, wink. I mean, I don't know. I got to get Z in there somewhere. Anywho, let's keep it moving because obviously the game 3s are coming. We'll see what the coaches say. We'll see the adjustments. That's the fun of the playoffs. It's constantly a chess match. But we got to talk about the people that have been removed from the chessboard completely on the other side of this break. Okay, guys, it's that time of year, and I'm not talking about just the WNBA playoffs. This is the time of year when we start seeing teams make their moves. Teams start to set themselves up for next season and the future of the organization, right? These moves seem so dramatic and so big in terms of setting up what a team wants to do moving forward, especially after they assess where they were this year. And we've seen two teams make some pretty dramatic statements as to where their future is headed. On Sunday, the Seattle Storm parted ways with Noelle Quinn, former WNBA player who had led the team for the past 5 years. And earlier this week, following the team's first round exit from the playoffs, the New York Liberty opted not to renew the contract for head coach Sandy Brondello. Mind you, she had been on a 1 year contract. So she had been with the team for past 4 seasons. And of course, they had just won a championship last year. I don't know why I'm whispering. I don't know why I feel like
It's
New
it's
York is
apparently a big
listening.
secret. Did the Liberty
But
not know this?
yeah, they are the reigning champs. So let's talk about both of these women and these teams, who might be their successors, and some of the larger cultural imprint that these type of factors, that are at play here. So Ben, you literally live around the corner from Barclays, which is so crazy that while this is happening, you are just gallivanting across Europe.
I
Um,
was actually home for this, Zena. Let me
you
be clear.
were
I was home for about
okay.
I had been home for maybe 7 hours by the
Oh,
time
see,
yeah.
okay. Listen, Jonathan Kolb, GM at at New York Liberty, was like, "I think Ben's out of town. Let's do it now." But he missed it by 7 hours. You've covered the Liberty during Sandy's tenure. You know how beloved she's been there. To many people, this was a shock, and to some, it wasn't. I want to know what you thought. Did you see this coming?
I was not surprised by this move. And I wrote about this earlier this week, and Jonathan Kolb actually talked about it on Thursday morning, that Sandy Brondello did not get let go because of this year's performance. She did not get let go, per Jonathan, because they lost in the first round. Like, he used the phrase that this was a proactive decision and not a reactive decision, that this was something that seemingly they had been thinking about for a long time. And we know this because after they won the championship last year, Sandy Brondello renegotiated with the Liberty her contract. And basically, in renegotiating the deal, she was guaranteed for this 2025 season. And then there was a partially guaranteed team option for 2026. And what that tells you is even after winning, she did not have a 3 or 5 year long contract. Like, basically, she had one more guaranteed year, and she coached her guaranteed year out, and that was that. And basically what Jonathan said on Thursday morning was that this is an ever-evolving period in the WNBA. And you might ask, Zena, what does an evolving period, an ever-evolving period in the WNBA mean? And I asked that question to Jonathan Kolb, actually, during
Thank
his
you.
press conference. And he was talking about just how the style of play in the WNBA is rapidly changing on both ends. And he specifically cited, free throw attempt rate and 3-point attempt rate as metrics in the course of his conversation. And, credit to Lucas Kaplan, who's another really good journalist who covers the Liberty, who actually wrote about this again before Jonathan Kolb's press conference, that in 2023, just over 70% of New York shots came from 3-point range or at the rim. That was first in the league by a mile. This year, 65% of their shots, free throws or threes, and that ranked fifth. And basically, while New York kind of stayed the same in how they executed on the offensive end, a lot of teams around them changed. And so in an effort per New York to be more innovative, to be more adaptable, they felt the need to make a move. Now, you can certainly argue, Sandy Brondello, a championship winning coach, she's won 2 titles. Could she have innovated or continue to help this team change and evolve? And I think that's a super fair question. And, continuity could be a catalyst for change. That was a phrase that Jonathan Kolb used. But in the eyes of the New York Liberty, they said, no, that is not the case. And that injury is, not her fault by any means, but they revealed some of the other flaws of the team. Defensive effort, inconsistent play by Jonquel Jones, not getting the shot profile that they want. And so in an effort to change and kind of stay with the times, or stay ahead of the times, really, get these market advantages, they end up making the move that they made.
I I saw that Brianna Stewart was very shocked when a member of the media had asked about whether Sandy Brondello would be here or not. Or I don't remember the exact question or how it was phrased, but I do remember her being like,
The media member
"What the
asked,
F?"
like, "What do you think about people saying that if Sandy deserves to be here next year?" Yeah.
Right. And she was just like, "What?" Like,
But not
we're
as
with
clean
her.
as that, Zena.
Right, exactly, right. There's another little F-bomb in there, but I mean, Sabreena, I love Ben's piece on this on the site, which I encourage all of you guys to read, because he also lays out how rare this is. There were no examples of people being fired right after a championship, but there were examples in the NBA of people being fired within 2 years or so. Um, but the impact on the players, when you've got a team that's just won a championship and now they're losing the coach that got them there, what could this mean in terms of, how they're prioritizing winning and what that looks like versus the culture of the team and like what's going on around the organization in New York?
Well, I think Jonathan Coe would argue that they're prioritizing both, right? That the culture wasn't what it needed to be to support winning, right? And that's why they're going in a
Mm,
different direction. And I obviously am not in that locker room, but I happen to disagree, you know? I think it's very
mm,
hard to win a title in the first year that you come into a new team. It has happened before by Becky Hammon in 2022 and a woman by the name of Sandy Brondello in 2014 in Phoenix. You don't just bring in a
wow.
new coach and expect her to win a title right away. But when you have a 32-year-old Brianna Stewart, when you have Sabreena Ionescu entering her 7th season in the WNBA, and Jonquel Jones, same age as Stewie, like you need to win right now. And it's weird to me that they're almost sacrificing a season because they were a little hurt and like didn't like the way things were going with Sandy Brondello in 2025. So I think it's very risky for New York to do this.
Mm,
Obviously, their players went to bat for Sandy, right? You saw
right.
that publicly. Maybe it was because of the way the question was framed. Like, obviously, you're not going to say bad things about Sandy while she's sitting right next to you on the podium. But I think it is telling that, like, I think one of the phrases that came out of the press conference from Jonathan Kolb was like, "We consider ourselves to be a player-led organization." That being said, I made the decision to fire Sandy. So slightly contradictory statements there, but
Mm,
this is clearly a decision that came from above. And it doesn't seem like there was a lot of faith in Sandy coming into the season because of the contract that she was coaching on. They're going to have to build an entirely new foundation next season because you're bringing in a new coach. Because let's face
right.
it, you lose Sandy Brondello, you're going to lose her husband, Olaf Lang, who's like your defensive coordinator. You're losing some of those assistant coaches. Uh, and, like talking to Becky Hammon this week, talking to Steph White this week, it's not that easy to just come in and expect things to continue from where they've been if you're going to bring in entirely new terminology, entirely new personnel, like people who are bringing in a new way of doing things. And
Mm,
Steph White knows this very well because she just came into Indiana this year. And, like, yeah, they expected to just continue on from what Caitlin Clark and, Aaliyah Boston did a year before, but it's just not how it works. So you can say all the right things about, like, yeah, we consider ourselves to be a championship organization. And we fell short of that standard this year. And so someone else is going to help us meet that standard. I just don't think you can do it that fast.
yeah.
And, like, it is a risky game to play when you have one of the players who may be top 2, top 3 player in the WNBA right now, and you're saying, like, "Hey, hold on. We might have to take a step back next year because, you know, whatever shortcomings they thought Sandy Brondello had as a head coach."
What's so interesting about that, and we should say Olaf Lang confirmed not returning for the team next year. Some of the other assistants, Sonia Rahman, we'll talk about her a little bit later. Unclear what her status will be. Andrew Wade, a player development coach who was also a head coach at Unrivaled. Not sure what it means for him. I think we'll have to wait and see when a new staff eventually comes in. To your question, or to your point, Sabreena, about time, like that was another word that came up in the context of Emma Mieseman this year. That's Jonathan reflected on, that maybe she just didn't have enough time to fully acclimate. And so I would expect New York, really, especially in the first half of next year's regular season, like I would bet they're going to preach that, like, we need time to figure out rotations, figure out playing style, figure out, again, the adjustments we need to make, and really try and be where we need to be come August or September, or I guess next year it'll be a little bit later. But basically, crunch time, the playoff push, that's when we need to be peaking, because that was the other thing that you very much did not see from the New York Liberty this year. And they said towards the end of the season, that is finally when they got healthy. And players and Sandy both talked about, we're finally figuring it out the week before the season starts. We're finally getting the opportunity because of health reasons to figure out our rotation, but how we want to play. But obviously they were not peaking, and it's really hard to then flip the switch, right? Compare that with the Las Vegas Aces, who very much were peaking, and we'll see how they continue to play. So I think they're going to use the regular season primarily as this testing ground, and then they're going to hope that with the new coach, with the new staff, and with a lot of the same core pieces, we don't know exactly who's going to be back, but Jonathan also talked about, wanting JJ, Stewie, Sabreena. He had a lot of praise for Benajolani Hamilton, a lot of praise for Leonie Febish's toughness, among other players. Like, I think we can expect some of those players back, if not all of them, that they'll coalesce at the right time, and that experience of being in postseason moments together will pay off. It's a good question, though, and expectations obviously are going to be really high on whoever comes in, and also Jonathan going forward too, because he's made the change that he's made.
Now, Ben, I know you're reporting on this, so you're going to be, our intel and a more neutral side. I'm gonna be with Sabreena over here. I think I'm also struggling with thinking that you're just gonna go and find a coach off the market and capitalize on the talent you have on this roster in such a quick period of time. I had a friend of mine reach out to me and ask me, like, what is this? Like, is this because of the CBA? Is this because of X, Y, and Z? A newer WNBA fan. And I was like, I think this doesn't have anything to do with the CBA, but I will say it is very clear that in the way that we just talked about the Minnesota Lynx playing Minnesota Lynx basketball, right? In the way that we've talked all season long about how quickly the Golden State Valkyries did what? Cement an identity, right? There are certain teams that have done a phenomenal job of basically letting the league know when you play us, this is what you can expect. And the thing about it is, let's just be real, in the Sandy Brondello era, we did not know what that was other than you're going to play some all-stars. You're going to play some really tough players that are really, really good at basketball, and that's going to be it. And yes, there's going to be a lot of threes. They're not going to do a lot of mid-range game. Sure, we knew that. We knew that they're going to be trees in the sense of the defense is going to just be long and it's going to be hard, but we don't know what's going to beat you every night and who's going to beat you every night.
It's funny you say that because I was thinking a lot about this, that for a number of years, Sandy's favorite phrase was good to great, paint to great, or paint to great, good to great. She would mix up the way that it was phrased. And I was thinking about, I felt like on a daily occurrence, I would hear that phrase. And then this year, I didn't really hear it much in the second half of the season. And part of that was because of injuries.
Yeah.
But to your question about identities changing, like, I think they kind of got away some from, what their identity was previously. And now they're going to have to definitely redefine it with high expectations. And, New York, going back to the point that you made, Zena, and I wrote about this too, like, they view themselves as a premier organization across all of sports, all of professional
And they
basketball.
are.
And
Yeah.
you look at what's going on in the NBA, like, Frank Vogel was the coach of the Lakers in 2020. He lasted just 2 more seasons, then they fired him.
Not a good idea.
Mike Budenholzer, 2021 Milwaukee Bucks title. They fired him 2
How did
years
that go?
after.
Right.
Michael
Right.
Malone, coach of the
These
Denver.
are good ideas.
I know, well, no. I'm just saying, like, New York
But
views
it's
themselves
comparisons.
as needing to capitalize on the window. And
Yep.
Sabreena might be
But
saying
again,
history.
did these organizations benefit from firing those coaches?
Well,
It's
I think
true.
I think that's a very good question. And what it leads to is who New York is going to look at. And for the people I have talked to, is that they very much are likely to target coaches who have NBA experience or in the NBA. And so it will be interesting to see, if they end up going that route officially with their next hire, like, what does that mean? Or do they follow the trend that Sabreena has outlined, that just swapping one NBA
That's
coach
what I'm
who has won a title with another doesn't necessarily result in a equal a title?
Yeah, Becky Hammond made this comparison to the New York Knicks because they obviously have their best season in 25 years or so,
was
and
gonna
they get to
say
the conference finals, and they're
Yep.
like, no, I don't think Tom Thibodeau is the guy. They fire him and have this protracted coaching search where it's unclear, like, who's even available, who wants to come interview for the job. They end up with somebody who, like, I like Mike Brown quite a bit. I think he's a good coach. I don't know if he's a better coach than Tom Thibodeau. It's hard to say, but you better have something in mind when you do something like this, because if you just go out into the wilderness and think we can find somebody better than Sandy Brondello, the history of the WNBA says there are not a lot of coaches better than Sandy Brondello. 2 of them already employed by the Minnesota Lynx and the Las Vegas Aces. So I really hope they have a plan. If you consider yourself a premier organization, you better have a plan.
Tibbs on libs, Sabreena?
Tibbs is a great coach.
That would be
A
crazy.
great coach.
That's good. Get the shirts made right now. And there's also the fact, like, I'm still thinking about this player aspect. You just mentioned the New York Knicks. I was going to bring it up from the perspective that Jalen Brunson had said he had Tibbs back. Who else would be better
Sandy-
to lead
Stewie
us?
said,
And
I have
Stewie
Sandy's
said it. And
back,
so,
our girl.
right. And so this is a whole another thing about just how this is also going to play with immediately gelling with this team that is 2 years removed from a finals, 1 year removed from a championship with a particular coach, and now having to move into another completely different regime. Now, the thing that you guys have been saying about this entire situation with Sandy Brondello is time. And this is actually a great transition to the other coach that we want to talk about. And this is Noelle Quinn in Seattle. She was with the Storm as a player and a coach for several years. And in 5 years, was able to make 4 playoff appearances. Now, Sabreena, you could say, I mean, she had a winning record overall, just over 50%, in her time in Seattle, but some folks said she had too much time and not enough success in that time, right? Why do you think it was time, I'm gonna say that word a million times right now, for the Storm to let go of Quinn?
Yeah, so Noelle Quinn, about 4.5 seasons as the head coach in Seattle. She made 4 playoff appearances, as you mentioned. She won 1 playoff series during that time, a 3-game series in the first round in 2022 when they beat the Washington Mystics. Other than that, she lost a play-in game to Phoenix in 2021 and then 3 playoff series to the Aces in 22, 24, and 25. So it seemed to me like there was a hurdle she couldn't quite get
Mhm.
over. They gave her plenty of opportunities to get over that hurdle with different teams, right? The first one was Stewie, Sue Bird, Jewel Lloyd team. Next one was NECA, Skylar, Jewel Lloyd, NECA, Skylar, Gabby. Like none of those iterations managed to quite get over the hump. You're looking at a team where like they have players who want to win, right? Those are players, very veteran players in Neko Gumake, Skylar Diggins, Gabby Williams, Ezzy Magbagor, right? Like they have won in other situations and they couldn't quite just get it done in Seattle. So, uh, like, this isn't a what have you done for me lately, as it was with Sandy Brondello. This is like, have we done anything we wanted to do in these 5 years? And I don't mean that to like besmirch Noelle Quinn. Obviously, coaching is a very hard job. It's not her fault that this was the roster that she was handed versus some of the teams that she lost to. I think you could argue that all of the Aces teams she lost to were more talented than the Seattle ones, right? And that's not necessarily on Noelle, but with all of the chatter, let's say, around the Seattle locker room, a number of people asking for trades out of Seattle, the fact that eventually you just have to win, like none of those things happened. And I think 4.5 years is a good amount of time for somebody to get a chance to figure that out.
I'm with it. I agree. I think that Noelle Quinn wasn't able to capitalize, as you mentioned, on all the versions of teams that were provided to her. That being said, there were aspects of her coaching in terms of her being a player coach. We've seen what she was able to do with Dominic Malonga this season, for example, right? Just being able to tap in to players that may have had some issues other places or hadn't found their footing in other places. And so I do want to give Noelle Quinn that credit, but it wasn't enough. As you mentioned, winning has to happen. But there were other things, Ben. Like I'll never forget the I think it was the schedule releases, or I can't remember exactly I think it was the schedule releases last year, and where a team was like making fun of the other teams around the association in their schedule release. And it was just basically like talking about the Seattle Storm just always having problems. Like there's always an issue in Seattle. And we can't say that Noelle Quinn was absolved of that. We know that there was this Jewel Lloyd situation. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that were off the court that could have factored into Noelle's situation and the decision to part ways with her.
I mean, we should say that nothing, the team in any of the investigations that they conducted never found anything
Facts.
substantive. I,
Yes.
I think what we should say too, and how this also compares to the situation in New York, is their GM, Talisa Rhea, she's never conducted a head coach search as the general manager before, right? So if you're someone, looking to make an imprint on an organization, as a GM, you obviously can tinker with and control and maneuver the roster as you see fit. But another really important decision that you have to make is who are you hiring as a coach? And so Noelle Quinn takes over. While we keep saying 4.5, she took over, I want to say 5 or 6 games into, what was it? The 2021 season when Dan Hughes, a longtime WNBA coach, stepped down, retired mid-season. And Noelle Quinn became the head coach there. But that's not
Yeah.
a full offseason search. Whereas Jonathan Kolb, this will now be the 3rd coach he has hired since he assumed the GM role. And so, if you're the Seattle Storm's front office, like now really is your opportunity to make a hire that shapes the future direction of the franchise. And I think the question is, and Sabreena started to talk about this too, is like, what is the future direction of the franchise and how do they hire a coach to do you focus on one direction or the other, right? You have players who, like Nneka Ogwumike and Skylar Diggins, are in their 30s, and then you
Not
also
just in
have
their 30s, 35.
35.
I don't mean to age
But
shame, but like
they
we're on
look
the other side of the
amazing.
30s.
We forget. Understandably, yeah.
And then you have a player like Dominique Malonga, who we saw how effective she can be in the postseason and in other sports in the regular season, and she's 19 years old, right? And so, I know, Zena, we always like to joke on this podcast about the two timelines warriors, but like, it will be
Sore
really
subject.
interesting to see who they hire and how they approach this next iteration, who they build around. Because the other thing we didn't see a lot of this year, and I think this speaks to coaches generally, is like we didn't see a lot of lineups. I want to say it's like less than 10 or 15 minutes the entire year of Ezi Magmagor, Neko Gumike, and Dominique Malonga. And that's not to say that that trio would have been great together, but I think you want to see some experimentation so that in key moments, does this work or does this not work?
Couldn't box out Jackie Young at the end of game 3. I'll tell you that much.
There you go. And like, it seems like they just tried options out and eventually like those options didn't work, or maybe they didn't try enough things out. And that's how you kind of get to the situation where you're looking for a new head coach, which the Seattle Storm are.
What's tough for me is, on one hand, I'm like, yes, Noelle Quinn did have a lot of time. She did have a lot of talent to work with. So I can't be mad at that. You just talked about the two timeline. I have to say that with a shudder. But you just talked about the two timeline in Seattle. And I don't know anyone that had tapped into Dominique Malonga so quickly. Like, we saw the way that Noelle Quinn, I mean, I did not talk to Dominique Malonga directly about this, but from what I could observe, she had tapped into her so well and built a relationship with her. So you're kind of like, let's give it one more go, or maybe, trust that Noelle Quinn can build on this. And it leads me into the conversation of the trust factor, right? And trusting and how the trust factor changes in between organizations. Of course, the number one thing we're seeing right now that Noelle Quinn has been fired from the Seattle Storm, there are no longer any Black female head coaches in the WNBA. The facts are the facts of that this is a majority Black league full of Black women. And there is starting to, I don't even know if it's starting. It's been clear that there is a double standard for Black women as coaches, um, being able to be seen as players and being loved as players and being trusted as players, but not necessarily as leaders. And the main reason I think about this is Teresa Weatherspoon is still glaring. The 1 year that she got to work with a brand new team with rookies, that seemingly loved her and seemingly really cared about how she played, and how she coached them up. We know that we've heard different stories since then, but 1 year and out, mind you, Tyler Marsh is in Chicago and I believe had a worse season than Teresa Weatherspoon had, and still has his job. Chris Koklanis still has his job down as Dallas and also had a significantly worse season than Noelle Quinn or Sandy Brondello and even Teresa Weatherspoon. And so I'm looking at this and I'm like, I can appreciate that every organization has their own varying levels of trust, especially when it comes to the amount of investment put into their team, right? If you have a lot of investment, a lot of higher ups keeping their eyes on where that money is going, you expect winning and you expect it quickly. So I can imagine there's a shorter leash on certain head coaching positions around the WNBA than there are others. But I'm talking about getting these women into position as players into coaches, and then giving them the opportunity, trusting them, providing them the resources, and particularly providing them the space to make mistakes. It seems as if that has not been in large quantities around the WNBA. And not just this past year, not this past season or this season, not just this past season, but overall, we have not seen, uh, I would say, a history of players coming in as coaches and getting a chance to really build. Noelle Quinn is one of those that got more time, but now she's gone. And I'm worried about what is the next door that's going to be opened for a former player into a coaching position, especially a Black female former player going into a head coaching position.
It's interesting that you say that, because I actually had one GM around the league text me this week and basically say a lot of what you said, but focus on this idea that Christy Tolliver, who is a former player, a black player and a top assistant of the Phoenix Mercury, that Kristi Tolliver should be picky. Because as you're talking about,
Mm.
Zena, a lot of coaches around the league right now, they're just not getting a lot of runway to grow, right? They're not getting a lot of opportunity to have multiple seasons to learn. And someone like Kristi Tolliver would be a first-time head coach. Now, Nate Tibbetts, sings her praises, says she's more than ready to be a head coach. And she's had opportunities in the past. And she is someone who, I think we hear her name floated in a lot of these openings. Someone like Breon January is one of the top assistants. Another former player actually played with the Seattle Storm, signed there while Talisa Ria was the GM in 2020. Another top assistant with the Fever, we hear her name. I think she could make a lot of sense in Seattle. But to your question, Zena, it seems like there is not a lot of opportunity for coaches, first-time head coaches, to want to grow right now. Now, some of these contracts, we should say, are often for 2 years, right? Or 2+1s with a team option. So that's not a ton of security. But then it's hard to then, you just got to be careful. Because even if you're Tyler Marsh right now, Tyler Marsh was a top assistant a year ago. People sung his praises of what he could do. Well, a year later, it's some people are calling for his job. And is that fair based on their performance? I don't know, you be the judge. But he didn't have a ton of opportunity to learn and grow as a first-time head coach. And so I think it seems like they're going to give him that another opportunity. Not every coach is going to get that second year, as you're talking about in the case of Teresa Weatherspoon, or not every coach is going to get the third year or the fourth year in the case of Noelle Quinn. So no, we definitely, there's a lot there that you threw out, Zena, but we are definitely in this moment where coaches are not given, being afforded the runway. And part of that is where we are in the league. People now really owners care about the WNBA in a way that they never have before. And their team trying to be successful, and they want to win as quickly as they can. And GMs feel that pressure too. And so that has also led to some of the changes, just macro sense, not even talking about the other dynamics you talked about.
I mean, we can justify every individual situation, right?
Yeah.
You can justify why Noelle lost her job and why Sandy lost her job or why even Spoon lost her job. But the fact remains is, like Zena said, there are no Black women currently in head coaching positions. And that is a broader trend that I think is worth looking into, because you said Tyler Marsh didn't get the opportunity to grow as a coach. He's getting the second year. Chris
Right.
Koklanis is getting the second year. Teresa Weatherspoon didn't get the second year, right? And it's Latricia Trammell got 2 years after making the WNBA semifinals, right? It's harder to find places where Black women are given the opportunity to continuously work on their craft and get better at head coaching. We saw Chicago and Dallas straight up say that they were not going to fire their head coaches, right? That's just a level of security that some coaches are just not getting, right? And I think it's we like I said, we can go through each case by case and figure out why this makes sense in this particular reason, but it's just hard to distance it from the overall trend that's happening here. And at least, thankfully, we still have a lot of former players in coaching positions, right? Like Becky Hammon, like Stephanie White, I guess no longer Sandy Brondello, but that they're all white women is not a great look for a league that is majority Black women, right? And I'm not saying that the WNBA needs a Rooney Rule, but the whole point of having the former players on the bench, adding an extra assistant coaching spot so that they could learn how to coach, it only works if you give them head coaching positions and actually, give them an opportunity to learn as a head coach. It's great that every WNBA team wants to say they're casting a very wide net and, making their search as broad as possible. But that leads to things like Rashid Mezion coming in and taking a coaching job, or Nate Tibbetts coming in and taking a coaching job. I'm I get it. Nate has done a great job. And Rashid, I liked a lot of the things he did in Connecticut, but you can't say that you're creating a space for former WNBA players to have a stake in their league and want to help grow it. And then when you have the opportunity to grow the league, you look beyond them, right? And that's it's what's frustrating, where candidly, as if I was somebody who was rooting for the Seattle Storm, I would not be disappointed that Noelle Quinn was no longer the head coach of the Seattle Storm. But it's just there's a broader trend at play here. And it is got to be really frustrating if you're somebody like Breon January or Kristi Tolliver, or somebody who's in the league right now thinking yeah, coaching is something I would like to pursue when I get older, but is there going to be a place for me in this league as it, like it's got to be so frustrating that like my owners care more about my team now, but that means they don't want me to coach the team, right? Like how stupid is that?
Right.
And
And I
and to know that you might only get one shot. Like you might
right.
only get that 1 year or the 2 years. And if you screw up that one shot, whether that's like because you as a coach aren't ready, or maybe because your team is not very good,
Hmm.
that could be it for all that you have worked for to try and get to that point.
And it just sucks because it's a trend that we're seeing in the WNBA, particularly with Black female players going into these roles. You just talked about the Rooney Rule, which was referring to the rule in the NFL, ensuring that you're interviewing, at least interviewing, a coach, coach of color. I don't even know if it includes women
I
in the
think it's
Rooney
just a
Rule.
coach of color. Yeah.
Okay, a coach of color, but, I don't necessarily believe that, a Rooney Rule is necessary in the WNBA, but I would like to see, and Morgan Tuck kind of alluded to this in her experience, coming up being a player, now being a GM in Connecticut, but just having been given the resources and the space and the tools to learn the business and to learn how she can become a leader on that side of basketball. She talked about on our pod how much she didn't know as a player going into the business side, and the front office side. And I just wish that maybe that's something that the WNBA can implement. And that could be regardless of your background, male, female, white, black, purple, it doesn't matter. Everyone, maybe you enact this through the CBA, but everyone receives a certain level of coaching. Like the head coaches get an opportunity to get some sort of training or some sort of support to ensure that they know how to manage their locker room, that they understand how to, whatever it is, some sort of summit that happens, I don't know. But it ensures that you're investing in these coaches so that they don't lose on their first chance that they have to prove themselves and to make an impact in this league.
I like that you talk about kind of that investment because, going back to one of the series that we are talking about right now is Stephanie White, and people have really sung her praises for how she's gotten the most out of this Indiana Fever team. And if you listen to Stephanie White talk, she will talk about Lynn Dunn for hours on end. Now, she has known Lynn Dunn since she was, I mean, at least in high school. Like Lynn Dunn tried to recruit her to Purdue back when Lynn Dunn was the coach of Purdue. Lynn Dunn coached her at the Indiana Fever. Lynn Dunn was her head coach and Steph White an assistant coach. And then when Dunn stepped down or stepped away from the franchise, Steph White replaced her. This is in 2015 and 2016. Like Steph White talks about Lynn Dunn, all like so much of how Lynn Dunn poured into her as a mentor in the coaching profession. And when you talk to coaches currently, like a lot of them also talk about not having those kind of stable, those mentors in the same way either, because again, if you're a coach who's only there for 2 years or 3 years, like you're trying to figure it out yourself and you don't have the time to pour in maybe as much as you would want to someone else. And so you lose that mentorship aspect. That's another problem when you talk to coaches about, exactly what you're talking about too, another offshoot of the dynamics we're talking about here.
Well, I just want to wrap it up because you mentioned some names already in Breon January and Christy Tolliver. We know there's Lindsey Harding as well, former players that have been coaching, whether it's, in the NBA and the G League for Lindsey's case at least, or in the WNBA, as in some of these other players. There are people that are circulating, former players that could be in these positions for not only, Noelle and Sandy Brondello's job, but these expansion teams as well. Any other names, Ben, Sabreena, that came up to mind as we're looking to next season and what roles could be filled?
Yeah, I mean, I like the name Sonia Roman. She's a New York Liberty assistant. This past year, she has experience being a head coach at MIT and also was on the assistant coach of the Memphis Grizzlies. And she's known as kind of an innovative basketball mind, worked a lot with New York's offense this year in their kind of special teams, special situations. I think someone like Sonia is a really good fit potentially in Seattle to me. A coach who has experience working with star veteran players, both from her time in the NBA and also the New York Liberty. And also, I think, can get the most out of a young player like Dominique Malanga. And so if you're Seattle looking to kind of play that two timelines game, I think she, to me, seems like a really good option there. I wouldn't be surprised if Toronto, when they make their choice, ends up going with a coach who has experience before, who has been a WNBA head coach before, whether that is a Sandy Brondello. I think that honestly makes a lot of sense. Someone who, like Sandy, we know can shape a culture, has great relationships with players, is very well liked. Like, to me, she seems like a really good option to try and get a team off the ground and create the kind of magic that you want to create. I think those are two names that stick out to me for those two openings.
Yeah, I think Ben hit a
Hey.
lot of the names, like some other former head coaches who could be in the mix, like James Wade, used to coach for the Chicago Sky. Letitia Chamel, we mentioned, former coach of the Dallas Wings, I think could find her name back in these conversations. Uh, I also just like some of the other assistants we haven't really talked about, like Grima Christmas Kelly, Austin Kelly, I think have both sort of entered their name for head coaching conversations. Nola Henry was obviously a coach at Unrivaled. If you're looking for a younger coach to maybe start something fresh with, like that's a good name to keep in mind.
Okay. Well, let's see what happens. I do hope the WNBA, Kathy, at this point, we're friends, girl. I done called you out in this pod so many times, good and bad. So hopefully you're listening to this. Let's set up a program, get these coaches on track, and feel as if they are given that runway that we've been talking about. Okay, well, we will see where the coaching carousel lands. I'm sure we'll hear some updates very soon. But now it's time for a fun game with Ben. Who said it? Okay, Ben, you've got a fun game for us called Who Said It, presented by BetMGM. Lock in for every basket with this WNBA SGP boost token. Use your token on any WNBA SGP, and you'll score a bigger payout if your SGP wins. I should have made you say this, Ben, because it is your game, but take it away.
Yeah, this is a game that is a play off of the actual Phoenix Mercury game that is going on this weekend, because there was a piece of news that came out this week that the WNBA semifinals have forced the Jonas Brothers to move their Phoenix concert date. So the Jonas Brothers are on this tour. I don't know, has anyone been to a Jonas Brothers concert on this tour? Zena, Sabreena?
Raise
Not
his
on this tour.
hand. Not
Raise
on
it.
this tour, but I have been to a concert before.
Okay, well, the Jonas Brothers were supposed to play on September 28th on Sunday. And guess what? They had to move their game to Monday because the Phoenix Mercury have a playoff game in Phoenix on Sunday afternoon. So on this
I'm
game,
snapping. Good for the
on this
Phoenix
game,
Mercury.
this is a Who Said It. We got 3 rounds here. It is Who Said It. I'm going to read out either a Jonas Brothers lyric, and I had to be pretty specific here, or a Diana Taurasi quote from her either during her playing career or as she makes this post-retirement tour, media tour that she is on. So it is either a Taurasi quote or a Jonas Brothers lyric. We got 3 rounds. Let's see how you guys do.
All right,
Quote number
in.
1, and I'm going to be as flat as I can be when I read them.
Okay.
Don't ask me to sing. The quote is, "One day when I came home at lunchtime, I heard a funny noise."
Oh, that's Jonas Brothers, 100%.
Jonas
That's
Brothers.
year 3000.
Yeah, year 3000, right?
That is the opening line of year
Okay,
3000. That
okay.
is correct. I was going to try
Very
and
fun.
get you maybe,
Forgets what exact generation you and I are, Zena.
No.
that is
Yeah, I mean,
the
that's
song.
I know that is the song
get a
and
little
the
song.
line, but I was hoping to bait you into a Taurasi, taking her kids to school. Now
Yeah,
she's
I
got
could see
time on
that.
her hand.
could see
Like,
that.
she heard a funny noise. What's the funny
Right.
noise that her kids would make? You never
Right.
know. All right, number two. I go to sleep every single night thinking I'm not good enough.
Diana.
That sounds like Taurasi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was this in her documentary maybe?
Is that the final answer?
Final
Yeah,
answer.
Taurasi, yeah.
That is correct. It's
Okay,
Diana
okay,
Taurasi.
okay, okay. Which is crazy.
Right? Diana
That's
Taurasi, come on.
insane.
You're the logo.
Woo.
That is
Imposter
true.
syndrome, kick that out the window.
It's
y'all.
real.
It's
It's
real,
real.
but kick it out.
And our third and final round is a quote that says, "Why would you fight or try to deny the way that you feel?"
That's the good one. Okay.
That is a very good one.
I
Ooh,
think
and the
it's-
thing is, I think it's the Jonas
I
Brothers.
think it's Taurasi.
Oh.
I
The
feel
thing
like
is, I can see
weren't you talking
why
about like
she
coming
could-
out?
I know. That's exactly what made me think that. She's saying that for either her or Penny,
Yeah.
right? But
Mm.
I feel like there's like a Jonas Brothers song about like falling in love.
Well,
And
of course there is.
why
They're a
would
pop
you?
group. Come on.
Obviously, right? I think I'm gonna. Okay, Sabreena, you
We can
say
split.
Tarazi.
You go
Yeah, we'll split.
Jonas, I'll go
I'm going
Tarazi. Yeah,
Jonas.
yeah.
That is a Jonas Brothers lyric from the
Ooh, way to
song
go, Zena.
Only Human. Only Human is the song
Oh, got it. Yep.
that
Yep.
lyric is in. So.
Well done.
Bravo, Ben. Great game. Great game. Way to finish us out.
I
That
like
is
that
all
we
we got
started
for
and
you guys
ended this
today.
episode clapping for Ben.
I know. Starting. Wow, Ben. Way to come back. Way to come back to applauses. I hope you guys are all applauding in your cars or wherever you're listening. Ben killed it. Sabreena killed it. And, I'm going to give myself credit. We killed it. We talked about the games, and there's more games happening tonight because both of the game threes of the semifinals will be tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern and 9:30 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you are sat for those. And game fours are coming up on Sunday. So figure out your Sunday plans because you cannot miss it. I don't know if y'all saw that picture between Afisa Collier and Alyssa Thomas. Game fours are necessary, so be sat. All right. We will be back on your feeds on Tuesday. We're going to break it all down. And before we go, just one little programming note. We are going to be doing our best to meet all of your finals needs this year. So not only will we be there in person, make sure you check out our socials. We're going to have a little bit more content. It's going to be fun. But we're also going to be coming to you with a pod the morning after every game. So we'll be off our usual cadence, but it's to make sure y'all get what y'all supposed to get. Okay? So make sure you tune in and you guys pay attention to that switch up. But wherever you're listening, if you subscribe, you won't miss out, regardless of cadence changes. So make sure you subscribe, tell your friends about us, tell your family about us. And while you're at it, do your job. Give us a rating. We literally started the show with applause, ended it with applause. You have one more thing to do to applaud us, and that is give us a 5-star rating. Drop a comment. We want to hear from you guys. And of course, Yahoo Sports Hub is calling your name. sports.yahoo.com/women's-sports for more content. On behalf of The Athletic, Ben Pickman, Sabreena Merchant, and Ben not getting a side stitch during that marathon, I'm Zena Queta, thanking you for listening, and we will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to No Off Season. To hear more, be sure to like and subscribe. We drop new episodes every Tuesday and Friday.